Hello everyone, it's Types here, and today I'm going to be making a tier list for the Gym Leader Challenge format. So first of all, if you don't know what the Gym Leader Challenge format is, there are three simple rules to remember. First of all, it's monotype, so each deck only has one type of Pokemon. For example, grass type, fire type, water type, whatever's your favorite type, whatever you want to choose. Also, it's singleton, so you can only have one copy of each card other than basic energy. So one of each Pokemon in an evolution line, one of each trainer, and there's a lot of interesting combinations that come out of this, and also interesting factors due to the limitation. But that's one of the major rules of the format. The third is that there are no rule box Pokemon or rule box trainers, as well as no ancient traits or ace spec cards. This both keeps the cost down and keeps it balanced. The balancing factor is because you won't be taking multiple prizes, and the multiple prize Pokemon are generally stronger than the single prize Pokemon. So now with those out of the way, let's get into this tier list. First of all, the reason I'm making a tier list is recently there was a official in real life tournament hosted by Full Grip Games, and with quite a bit of money on the line and quite a few people there. I was lucky enough to be able to participate in this, and I will likely have a video running over my deck as well as the other decks that did very well. I ended up finishing 3-3, did not make the top cut, but really enjoyed it. Very well run event, and I will quickly be going over that later. That will certainly have an influence over where I put these types, but certainly not the only factor. The other factors that will influence me here will be other tournaments, specifically on Limitless, and also some games I've just played and seen in the format casually. One place I've played the games is through the Discord. I will have a link to that in the description. This is the Tricky Gym Discord, the creator of the format. There was quite a bit of discussion. If you want to work on your deck, if you also want to play games, that's a great place to do so. It's generally a great community. So, that out of the way, let's start going into the tier list. Of course, starting with grass type here, and that's going to end up in B tier. Overall, it's very strong. With cards like Rillaboom and Venusaur, you can get a ton of energy on the field, and you use powerful attackers like Zarude, Shining Genesect, and there are a few others as well. However, one thing that really holds this type back is its lack of a draw engine. This makes the type relatively inconsistent. When it does really well, it really shows off its strength. It can pretty much one-hit anything, and it is almost impossible to slow down with its massive amounts of energy acceleration, and also its very powerful Pokemon. However, one of the major downsides of it, as I said, is the lack of draw power. You have Sawsbuck, which once in your turn allows you to just draw one card, but that certainly isn't extremely powerful. And there are quite a few stronger draw engines, and with that being the only thing you can, drawing one card per turn on a stage one isn't very strong. This means the deck's very reliant on just a lot of draw supporters, which is fine, but certainly later on in the game, if you get end or reset stamp to a low hand size, you won't really be able to find the boss's orders. And additionally, the type's pretty straightforward, meaning not too many options for sniping damage or slowing your opponent down with most of your big attacks. And that means if you get behind, it can be hard to get back in it. Additionally, your support Pokemon are super crucial, so if those go down, you can't really do too much about it. The type is overall very strong, but certainly can be messed up from its main game plan, in which case it doesn't really have another option. There's also another build of Grass focused on special conditions and some super attacks. However, that build's just not as strong, and while it does have some elements of disruption, it certainly isn't generally strong enough to slow your opponent down. And also, of course, lacking the draw power. So it's generally this type I wouldn't say is quite strong enough. It's certainly quite good, but doesn't have all the oomph to put it up to A tier or even S tier. And additionally, we have fire type here, and that honestly isn't a particularly strong type. I'll put it in C tier. It has a very powerful draw engine in the form of cards like Salazzle and Cargo and Delphox. However, those are obviously all evolutions, which is fine. but they also don't provide great attacks. You have Delphox with a decent attack, but obviously a stage 2. So your draw power is obviously very strong, but it's not attackers. And the attackers that you do have are not generally as strong. This is probably the type I'm least familiar with, or at least one of those. But generally, from what I've seen, it doesn't have quite enough firepower in order to take the KOs it needs, and more importantly, to keep up the KOs. Some of the more powerful Pokemon, such as Charizard, rely on obviously getting the stage 2 set up, and some of the more powerful basic Pokemon rely on you getting Welders and Blacksmith to accelerate a lot of energy. It's a pretty energy hungry type, but it can't really keep itself going. It does have enough power to go through one attacker, but then it just burns out. And it certainly has potential with cards. As I said, my Cargo, super powerful, allowing you to stack any card on top of your deck with just a stage 1 Pokemon. However, it also has a heavy retreat cost of 3, meaning it can very easily get stuck in active. And overall, the type isn't super versatile. You definitely have a lot of big, powerful attackers, but a ton of other types have that as well. And that's pretty much all Fire has going for it. You do have some burn Pokemon that can just burn your opponent's Pokemon a lot, and it can be difficult for your opponent to deal with that. However, that usually isn't strong enough, and your opponent will be able to either speed through and take out your Pokemon before you can get set up, or they will just be able to take the hits and just win before you do. The type's not super fast and takes a lot of work to get where you want to go. So overall, it's one of the weaker types, certainly playable and interesting to construct, but not as strong as a lot of the other types here. Moving on, we have what is one of the strongest types in the format, that being a water type. I'm only putting it at B, but it's very close to A. It's seen a ton of play and a good amount of success. It's won one of the 4 online tournaments on Limitless, and we've seen it played a ton as well. It's certainly been the most played deck through all the tournaments, and it's just very powerful. You have very powerful energy acceleration in the form of Blastoise and Frostmoth. You also have a pretty solid draw engine in the form of Octillery, and have the Inteleon and Drizzle to search cards out. You also have the option to spread with the other Inteleon from Chilling Reign, as well as a variety of Pokemon that spread with their attacks. There is also just the Hydro Pump attack, a classic water type attack seen on many Pokemon since the very beginning of Pokemon TCG, that just have a ton of energy on them. Then they just power through your opponent's Pokemon. It certainly is very strong, and having the option for spreading is also very good. One of the most powerful water type Pokemon has to be Wailord as well, with its massive 200 HP. Its powerful Hydro Pump attack with a 40 times multiplier per energy on it. And obviously, as I said, power it up with cards like Frostmoth and Blastoise makes it absolutely massive and almost impossible to deal with in one turn unless you're hitting it for weakness, and just a massive threat. However, it doesn't necessarily always have the options to take care of your opponent if you get behind. It relies on setting up a lot of Pokemon, so if they're not set up, there's not too much you can do. And the comeback mechanic is kind of limited. You obviously have some spread, but not really enough to make it just a little bit of the deck with the Hydro Pump aspect, giving you power early and also power to come back. And the spread certainly doesn't have the power early, so you really need to rely on being able to take a lot of fries in one turn. You can play it with something like Amazing Rare Kyogre to do a lot of spread, comboing that with cards like Counter Energy, Milotic, and some other options, but generally that's not strong enough. And Water certainly has a lot of options and is pretty close to being one of the best decks in the format, but in my experience comes up a little bit short. One thing that is nice about the type is that you can diversify weakness. Water having 3 weaknesses that we see quite often pretty spread evenly. We have lightning type weakness on some of the newer Pokemon, also some of the older Pokemon. We have grass type weakness. As we see, grass is a pretty solid type, so you want to stay away from that. Some Pokemon like Blastoise have that weakness, so something to keep in mind. And then metal type weakness. So you can mix it up to hopefully give yourself a decent chance in every matchup. And so that's something nice, and most types can't do that. However, as I said, the comeback mechanic isn't there that much. Water type has gone to cards such as Hex Maniac to ability lock your opponent, and that has been a crucial part of that deck. However, obviously any type can play that, and water then can be hurt by it just as much if your opponent's using that. So I feel it's not a strong enough comeback mechanic. You're not exclusive to water at all either. So I would definitely say it has a lot of potential, and certainly we have seen it do well because it has just hits big numbers. But I feel like it falls a little short in its versatility sometimes. Next, we have one of the best types, if not the best type, lightning type. This is definitely my type, so I certainly may have quite a bit of bias. However, this type has done extraordinarily well in tournaments. It's scored the most types and has seen a decent amount of play, but hasn't certainly been the most played. As I said, that was water. And it has topped 2 of the 4 Limitless tournaments, placed second a few days ago at the Full Grip Games tournament, and is just overall super strong. There are a ton of different options for this deck and a ton of really strong cards. One of the standout cards is, of course, Amazing Rare Raikou. If you don't know what it does for 1 lightning, a grass in the middle, 120 to your opponent's active, and 120 to one of their bench Pokemon. This is powered up with, of course, the lightning just being any lightning energy. It could be accelerated, it could just be attached. And then a counter energy if you're behind, filling the rest of that attack cost. This can be set up in one turn with something like a Raihan as soon as one of your Pokemon goes down, and it's just extraordinarily powerful. It's just so strong, allowing you to usually take 2 KOs on important Pokemon. Probably your opponent's main attacker that just took an early KO, and one of their crucial bench Pokemon that allows them to draw cards, such as something like Octillery. And there are quite a few other draw Pokemon you can take out. Pretty much all support Pokemon that aren't stage 2s you can take out with that snipe. And a lot of attackers as well. It's just so strong. Of course, once you've gone up in prizes, the counter energy won't work anymore. You can pay it with stuff such as Prism Energy or any other type of energy that can fulfill either the grass or the metal, and it's just super strong. Additionally, it has what I think personally is one of the best, if not the best, draw engines in the form of Zebstrika, allowing you once during your turn to discard your hand, draw 4 cards. Many professors research every single turn, allowing you to go through your deck extremely quickly. Of course, losing all these cards can hurt, so you do have the other option in Electrode, allowing you once during your turn to draw till you have 4. Water type has Octillery, allowing you to draw till 5, which is obviously very strong, but drawing till 4 is not bad either. I personally don't play this card. It's certainly a nice option for slower games, and these two together can allow you to draw through your deck extraordinarily quickly. Of course, losing all these cards can be really bad, so the Lightning type deck plays a copy of Lysander's Trump card, forcing each player to shuffle their discard pile into their deck. An extraordinarily powerful card, and a card that puts Lightning really high up there because it can use that card really well. It goes through your deck very quickly. You also have powerful energy accelerators such as Electric and Flaffy with the Dynamotor abilities, accelerating once in a turn from their discard pile to a bench Pokemon. Which we've seen some, not all of us have played that, but certainly a nice option. And we see quite a variety of powerful attackers. There are some such as Electros, Zapdos, Regieleki, which just deal a ton of damage for a decent amount of energy. And then we also have the Luxray line, one of the most powerful lines in the whole format. The Shinx allowing you to evolve turn 1 going second into the Luxio, which just item lock and 30 damage for just 1 energy. And as I said, with the Shinx, it can be done as early as turn 1 going second, which is incredibly powerful, and it evolves into the debatably even stronger Lux Ray, dealing 160 for only 1 energy the turn you evolve into it, which takes out almost any Pokemon. Then from there, it can just do 120 for 2. I have a Lightning GLC list in the description, which you can check out for more information. Certainly quite a bit to talk about there. This is a very powerful type. You also have Zapdos, which can be very strong early game or late game for finishing things off, just dealing 80 if it switches to active. So overall, one of the best types, and certainly one you should watch out for. Additionally, it hits water for weakness, something which is also quite nice. Next, we have what is not one of the best types, fighting type. We've talked about how draw engines are so important, and the only reason grass can get by without much of one is because it's just so strong with this tons of energy acceleration, and it is really powerful at times. Well, fighting doesn't really have that. It definitely has some nice attackers and stuff like Buzzwole. There's an Excadrill and a Donphan, which are both quite strong. There are a few more. However, the deck really lacks any strong energy acceleration and any draw engine. Two very powerful pieces. The type doesn't rely too much on energy acceleration because most of the attackers are only 1 energy, a few are 2, but very payable. And you have cards like Colossal from Rebel Clash to fulfill that attack cost. The stage 2 just accelerating a fighting and a fire if you also choose to play that from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. Or actually, I believe it can be to 2 different Pokemon if you want as well. Essentially, just a double Dynamotor, or even just a single Dynamotor if you want to. It can also be to the active, I believe. I've not played too much fighting, but I have played against it with Lightning and still have been able to beat it. It definitely lacks the consistency to keep up its attackers. If you draw right, it can be strong and certainly compete, even win against other types. But the type really relies a ton on draw supporters, and when you're relying on that, you're not using powerful supporters to disrupt your opponent or anything like that. Same problem with grass, except the type really lacks the power and consistency of grass. And of course, grass also has the Grovyle and another Pokemon with the same ability, just allowing you to watch it during your turn, search for any Pokemon of that type. Certainly very powerful for grass during the early game. Fighting really lacks that. So fighting just falling short, and it does hit weakness on debatably the best type in Lightning. However, that certainly isn't even that good of a matchup because the type just can't really find its stuff when it needs to. Next, we have Psychic type. This is another very strong type, actually winning the Full Grip tournament a few days ago, and it's very strong. It has a few very crucial cards to it. Probably the most important would be either Dimension Valley or Malamar. Malamar with the Dynamotor, essentially the Dynamotor ability called Psychic Recharge, attaching the energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon, and then also Dimension Valley, reducing your attack cost by 1 colorless. Dimension Valley being an extraordinarily powerful stadium, very similar to the Thunder Mountain Prism Star. Very powerful stadium. There's obviously banned in this format being a rule box card. However, it's just so strong, reducing attacks of your very powerful Pokemon, which Psychic certainly has a bunch of as well, such as Glanard Articuno, the Baby Blacephalon, and Giratina. You also have mediocre Vagent in the form of Gardevoir, which can also accelerate energy, and you have the Musharna also having the ability, the Muna having ability, allowing you to just put both active Pokemon to sleep, I believe, for some nice disruption. And Musharna, just very similar to Pidgeotto of colorless. Look at the top 2, put one to your hand, put the other one back. Obviously, that other one you'll just draw into next turn. However, you can shuffle your deck to not play that card again. And drawing more cards is always nice. And then the Gardevoir with essentially a draw 2 ability, and then attaching a Psychic Energy there you bind to your Pokemon. Quite nice. Kind of reminiscent of Zacian V's ability, to be honest, if you are familiar with that, but just very powerful type. And this also has quite a few spread elements. There are some such as a Crobat line, which is similar to the Glare and Obstagoon line of Dark type, just pinging 2 with the Golbat, 3 with the Crobat, of course on play. You also have cards like Marshadow with Let Loose, one of my favorite cards, certainly very powerful. Not actually played in the winning list, but essentially a judge. Each player shuffles, draws 4 on play, being the only type essentially with draw power on a basic Pokemon. It's something such as that the Denny or Crobat certainly isn't here in this format, and the Marshadow just is extraordinarily powerful and can smooth their deck out if you want, or disrupt your opponent, and just searchable as well, being super strong. Next we have Colorless. Certainly another very strong type, however, it's one of the most difficult types to pilot. It certainly doesn't make it bad, but it means I don't think it's quite hit its peak, and that's because it is control, removing your opponent's resources, also stalling, and just stopping them from doing stuff. We've seen quite a few different variations, some being like hand lock, also having to do things like ability lock, and energy denial, stalling with cards like Regigigas. You of course have the very powerful Pokemon like Oranguru to recover with its resource management attack, and Munchlax to recover with its ability. You also have a very powerful draw engine, one of the best in the format, in Cinccino and Pidgeotto. Cinccino, essentially the trade ability, discard 1, draw 2. Pidgeotto, the top 2 put 1 in your hand, the other on the bottom of your deck. Also very strong, and they just form as this nice backbone to draw a lot of cards very quickly, which is something very important in control type decks. So it's certainly a very strong type. However, it's very difficult to hit the bottom of your deck in order to get something like a hand lock because of Lysander's trump card. And it is also just really tricky to deal with that card in general. You have cards like Stoutland to support a lock, but your opponent can escape rope around it. And you have cards like Delcatty to try hand lock, as well as Oranguru and Munchlax to just recover your supporters, your items such as Reset Stamp, Justin James, Delinquent, with a Stadium to discard cards from the hand. You have Lieutenant Surge's strategy to play multiple supporters, but of course there's the issue of draw abilities such as Zip Strike, same draw abilities Colorless has, stuff like Remoraid and Water. And most types, specifically the strongest types, have good draw. You can just draw out of that, so that forces you to play a card like Hex Maniac as well to keep a hand lock or shut your opponent down. And in general, this type isn't strong enough or fast enough to get your opponent out of the game. I played against this type quite a few number of times and was pretty much able to beat it almost every time with cards like Zip Strike to draw through my deck. I just keep the pressure on with attacks. It just feels so slow. Obviously, control is always going to play slow. That's its whole game plan. But even in this slower format, it just can't really compete. Additionally, one thing to know about this format is obviously all Pokemon are the same type. In a format like Standard, you could have a card such as Crobat V, Gust into the active. You could be playing a deck such as Pikachu and Zekrom, which only has Lightning Energy, and now this guy can't attack. In Gym Leader Challenge format, any Pokemon, assuming it doesn't have some really weird attack cost, can attack. And some weird support Pokemon that doesn't really do much damage can attack. So they can't guess anything into the active that will just sit there doing nothing because it can't attack, unless they're able to really get energy off of it as well. And it just is super vulnerable. As long as your opponent plays carefully, they can usually just play relatively reserved and just keep dealing damage, which you can't quite deal with. And they can also save the cards at the right time, such as notably Lysander's trump cards, as I said, to refresh their deck. Another type we have here is Dark type. Honestly, this type is very strong. Did quite well at the recent tournament. It topped the first Limitless tournament. It's done really well since then. The power of this type comes from a lot of the similar things from Lightning. The one thing it lacks is a draw engine, which is why it's probably slightly below Lightning. However, it has the very powerful Guzzlord. It's attacked for 2 darkness, 2 colorless, dealing 120. Not particularly impressive. Until you see the fact that it has um, some extra text saying if you take a knockout, you take an extra prize, which is obviously just insane. You can just take more prizes than is meant to be really taken in the format, and is just super strong as long as you can take KOs with it. It almost completely carries Dark by itself. Honestly, Dark doesn't have that much else going for it, especially lacking a draw engine. But Dark type has Guzzlord, which is super strong. It can honestly just steamroll next by itself. Just need to take 3 knockouts. Same as Arcustat and Palkia decks in Standard. They can be powered up with cards such as B-String, Double Colorless Energy, Raihan, Dark Patch, a number of things. And you can even put it in a deck with High Dragon to accelerate to it if you really want. Dark also has a few other quite strong options in the Galarian Weezing from Rebel Clash, ability locking and poisoning for 4 each turn, which is pretty solid and pretty impressive to deal with, especially if you're a type such as lightning or colorless or even water, relying on its abilities to do pretty much everything, like accelerate energy, keep your deck moving, and keeping everything going. The ability lock is so brutal. Psychic also has that in cards such as Garbodor, or of course something like the Wobbuffet. But Weezing has a strong attack to keep a ton of pressure on, and can even with the poison get KOs going into your turn, meaning your opponent is forced to send something out just to take a hit, maybe even give up multiple prizes to Guzzlord. You also have a couple of very powerful Weaviles, one that does more damage for each opponent's ability in play, the one that's seen the most play. It does 50 per, so if your opponent has 3 abilities in play, it does 150, and this is only for 1 Darkness Energy, dealing tons of damage, pretty much one-shotting everything. So those 3 are probably the core of the deck. There's some other mediocre draw cards with like on-play abilities that are evolutions, which are certainly nice, but not super strong, and really Dark is just dealing with it. But there's also Hoopa, which is very strong, paired with the Zoroark with stand-in. Hoopa doing only 90 damage if you're moving to the active this turn. Zoroark, of course, with its stand ability, allowing you to switch it into the active, and then just attaching a card like Air Balloon, Hiding Darkness Energy, you give it Free Retreat to allow you to hit that 90 damage with Hoopa every single turn. And overall, Dark strong type, generally similar to Lightning, lacking that draw engine, but having these powerful Pokemon that are probably slightly better. You have Guzzlord, probably a little better than Raikou in terms of taking a lot of prizes. You have Hoopa, probably a little better than Zapdos because it can be paired with Stand-in Zoroark. And then you also have this Weezing, which just ties it all together. Next, we have Metal type. Metal type is honestly okay. It's not that strong. It doesn't really hit much for weakness. It can hit some water type Pokemon for weakness. And it can hit Fairy for weakness, but not to reveal some psychic Pokemon as well. However, the major downside, this type doesn't really have a particularly strong draw engine either. In terms of energy acceleration, it's okay, it's fine. It has a dynamo if it wants. With the Bronzong, honestly, a lot of very powerful Bronzongs. However, what this type really does have going for it is its defensive ability. Cards such as Aegislash is a very powerful Copperajah as well, which is, I believe, the biggest card in the format. I may not be right on that, but certainly up there. I believe it has, or actually it has 190, I believe, so not the most powerful. It's certainly up there. And you also have a lot of other damage reduction cards, such as Metal Goggles, Metal Frying Pan, and then you can heal a bunch with a variety of cards. Metal type really being a slow, grindy deck, and certainly showing its power. But it doesn't really have quite enough damage to take out your opponent's Pokemon generally. It just falls a little short in that department. It certainly has some cool options with Cortana and Celesteela, as some nice Ultra Beast options. Other types certainly have these Ultra Beast options as well, but Metal probably having some of the best. However, I feel the type just doesn't have quite enough draw engine, quite enough consistency, quite enough power to really do it. Another pretty weak type here, unfortunately, is Dragon type. One of the worst. Certainly very challenging to build with its variety of energy types and its attack costs, making it really weird, very inconsistent, relying a ton on special energy, and just having these difficult to pay attack costs. Setting up in the early game is pretty difficult. You have cards like Debite to switch out your Pokemon, and you have the very powerful Dragonite with its fast call ability from Team Up. You once in your turn to search for any supporter. Um, Obviously, super strong, allowing you to get a draw supporter to continue setting up, finding all your pieces, allowing you also to find something like Guzman Hala to find your special energy, and additionally allowing you to find cards such as Lysander's Trump card or any disruption support like Hexmania. You just slow your opponent down, find all your stuff as well, keep going with your special energy. Additionally, you have the powerful attacker and alternate Necrozma, something very, very nice that can deal massive damage with its attack. Obviously, seeing quite a bit of play as a relatively cheap and very powerful deck and expanded for only a metal in the Psychic, dealing 170 and destroying energy. But obviously, that clause saying it can't attack unless your opponent has two or less prize cards remaining. So you can pair it with cards like Silent Lab to turn off that ability. Very dependent on that though, and if you can't really get that rolling, can't find your pieces early on, it won't quite set up. Even at that point, it's kind of awkward to keep finding things, and a very difficult type to play as well. Certainly an interesting type, but I don't feel quite strong enough. Certainly with some new cards coming out though, could be very strong. Interested to see how that goes. Lastly, we have Fairy type. Unfortunately, that is going to go in the F tier. Definitely the worst type. I don't think there's too much argument here, and it's obviously at the serious disadvantage of only having two blocks of sets to get cards from, and also not the newest set. Obviously, Power Creep hurting it there. So it just really lacks the damage output to take KOs in the way which most other types can, and lacks the number of Pokemon as well. I could theoretically see play as a controlled style deck, but it doesn't have quite the draw engine that Colorless has, and it doesn't have quite the control Pokemon either. In general, the support is fine. You have Xerneas to accelerate some energy, which is really cool. You also have stuff like the Slurpuff to draw cards. You have the Aromatisse to move your energy around. And just a variety of really cool Pokemon, but it really lacks the attackers. Some of your best are just some things such as the Xerneas. It's a very powerful Fable, but in general, the type doesn't quite have what it is to compete. So pretty much that's all there is to the tier list. I don't feel like there's any type that can compete outside of maybe Fairy, but even that you probably get to make work. And it's a very interesting format. As you notice, there's no S tier type on this list. Nothing that stands above the rest and completely dominated. You've seen a variety of types, very powerful cards. However, they certainly do have weaknesses, and the player's skill and the way they choose to manipulate each matchup really is important in everything. So, unlike in as far like standard, where the game's much shorter, you have much less time to determine all your moves. This has a ton of different interactions, and also routing the game and, for example, taking out your opponent's draw engine, taking out their support, taking out their attackers. A ton of interesting moves to make there. Really great format. As I said, if you want to check out more, check out some of the links in the description, such as the Tricky Gym Discord or TwoMillerChallenge.com. Any other thoughts you have, you can leave a comment. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about this format, what you thought about my list, anything you felt like I should have added, should have removed. Also, if you like this and want to see more Gym Challenge content or more tier list content, then you can just leave a like. I'd really appreciate that. And if you really like this and want to see more, as I said, You can hit the subscribe button, also hit the notification bell to keep receiving notification of my content. I will try to keep putting out more content. I want to look at more GLC decks, also probably try some standard decks. If you have anything you'd like to see me do as well, you can leave a comment. Anyways, see you next time.